A new documentary produced in New Orleans tells the story of 272 enslaved people sold by Jesuit priests in 1838 and how selling them to Louisiana plantations saved Georgetown University.
About 4,000 of their descendants are alive today. David Hammer was invited to a special screening at Loyola University and tells us why the story is still so relevant.
Obituaries are the life stories of individuals, and during this process we learned of a lady who was born on a plantation, lived to be 99 years old, and the family came to do the obituary and very little information was received. And my sister looked at me and said, "We're burying our history."
During Black History Month, I was invited to watch the first public screening of a new documentary called The Georgetown 272, The Journey. And if you don't know who the 272 were, don't worry. Not long ago, neither did Al Moten Jr., the film's producer and director.
Back in 2020, during the pandemic, around June, I actually got a call from a good friend of mine. His name is David. He worked at Loyola University Hospital. And he said, "Hey, Al, you ever heard of the 272? And I was like, "No, what are you talking about?"
In 1838, Jesuit priests sold 272 enslaved people to Louisiana plantations to keep Georgetown University afloat. Dr. Charlene Senegal Duquire is the chair of African American Studies at Xavier University. She appears in the film.
The enslaved people who left Georgetown, they endured a middle passage, getting on a ship and surviving a month-long trip from Maryland all the way to the deep south, the port of New Orleans. If you can imagine the horrors of the middle passage, it was a rough time, being put on an auction block, being separated from all of the people they knew their entire lives and being sold to two gentlemen.
And she spoke to me at the screening.
What people have to understand is that coming down to Louisiana at this time was a death sentence.
In the film, Richard Cellini, founder of the Georgetown Memory Project, describes how university leaders initially hoped that death sentence ended the story of the 272.
What happened to the people? If Georgetown owned and then sold 272 enslaved people to save the university, what happened to them? And about 6 hours later, I got an email back from this very senior, very knowledgeable, very high integrity member of the working group who said, "Richard, Georgetown looked into this just a couple of years ago, and what we discovered was that they all immediately died of a fever, and they left no traces and no descendants." And I remember looking at that email, just sort of sitting there kind of stunned. And I remember thinking, even the Titanic had survivors.
Cellini dug up genealogical records that proved there were survivors, and they did have descendants, including Matthew Mims, who's from Maringouin, Louisiana, west of Baton Rouge.
I saw it come out in the local newspaper, and that was the first news that came, straight across to me. And when I found out, I just felt like I wanted to investigate a little bit more about what was going on and how it related to me and my family.
That's interesting. I mean, we did several stories. Former anchor at WWL, Sheba Turk, did several stories in 2016 and 2017 about it. And then it's kind of fallen out of the national attention, I think, recently. And this film is bringing it back to the fore. Why do you think that's so important?
I think it's really important because it's a part of, not just my family history, but a part of American history. I think a lot of times what we try to do is put things down and not bring it up because there's racial issues that, can be a little bit of a touchy subject for a lot of people. Yeah. But as we learn and as we grow about this, and the more that we communicate with one another, we can actually bring this to the forefront in a healthy way, so we can actually understand, okay, this happened, this was a part of history. Though it was a painful part of history, how can we grow together?
Georgetown talked about reckoning with this history back then in 2016, 2017 timeframe. Did they follow through, though?
No, short answer, no, they didn't really follow through.
Georgetown and the Jesuits have responded to this history. It's not that their response isn't good, it's just not good enough.
It's very important because, again, we have erasure of a lot of African American history, and we need to ensure that people understand that the history of the institution of slavery is something that America was built on, and even though it was a nasty past, we still have to understand that past in order to move forward to the future.
And that's the whole goal, really, of this documentary, to bring it out, to heal it, because it needs to be healed, it needs to be brought out. And, you know, just like a wound, you can't keep the wound has to get hair. So we're hoping that this documentary gets out. We want to get out nationwide and worldwide.
David Hammer, WWL, Louisiana.
Well, Georgetown and the Jesuit Order have pledged $42 million to support the Descendants Truth and Reconciliation Foundation. And the school says it gives another $400,000 each year to community-based projects for the descendants. A Georgetown spokesperson did send us a statement saying, quote, Georgetown is engaged in a long-term and ongoing process to more deeply understand and respond to the university's role in the injustice of slavery and the legacies of enslavement and segregation in our nation.